What if Christian Bale's Batman squared off against Henry Cavill's Superman in BVS? Well, he almost did, as the film nearly included Metallo, the Joker, and even the Riddler, and wouldn't have ended with Superman dying. Not only that, but a decade earlier, we almost got a very different Batman vs. Superman film that would have seen Josh Hartnett as the Man of Steel. So let's dive in and find out what that film would have been about, and how Dawn of Justice was almost very different, as we take a look at what could have been Batman vs. Superman. Before we dive in, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, CyberGhost VPN, an essential tool for protecting your digital privacy. Trusted by 38 million users worldwide, CyberGhost is one of the top-rated VPNs on the market. With more than 20,000 5-star reviews and a near-perfect Trustpilot score, it's easy to see why so many users call it excellent. Incognito mode might hide your history from others on your device, but your internet provider, school, or work network, and even the websites you visit, can still see everything you do online. To stay truly anonymous, you need CyberGhost VPN. With one click, it encrypts your entire internet connection and reroutes your traffic through secure servers in over 100 locations, making it virtually impossible for anyone to trace your activity. It works on all major devices and operating systems, and you can protect up to 7 devices at the same time, perfect for sharing with friends and family. And when it comes to streaming, CyberGhost unlocks content from streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime that may not be available in your region. With just a few clicks, you can switch your virtual location and start watching content from around the world. CyberGhost is offering an exclusive deal: 84% off, 4 extra months free, a 45-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 support, all when you use the link in the description. It's a powerful way to protect your privacy and access content from around the world. Don't miss out. Click the link below and start browsing safely with CyberGhost VPN today. In a blink and you'll miss it shot from I Am Legend is a poster in Times Square for an unproduced early 2000s Batman vs. Superman movie that never happened. Except at one point it was supposed to. Codenamed Asylum, Warner Brothers initially planned to market the film as Batman and Superman. Then, just 1 week before release, the word "and" would be replaced on all promotional material with the word "versus." It was a twist meant to shock audiences and drive hype. The film would have been directed by Wolfgang Peterson, hot off of directing Air Force One and The Perfect Storm. The script was initially written by Seven's Andrew Kevin Walker before the studio brought in Akiva Goldsman, the screenwriter behind both of Joel Schumacher's Batman films. Goldsman also wrote a draft of I Am Legend, hence the Batman vs. Superman Easter egg in that film. So what would the film have been about? Years after retiring as Batman, Bruce Wayne is trying to live a normal life. He's engaged to a woman named Elizabeth, attempting to leave behind his violent past. Meanwhile, Clark Kent is grappling with the emotional fallout of a divorce from Lois Lane, the strain of being Superman all the time proving too much for even the strongest relationship. He's also grappling with a growing crisis of purpose, questioning his role on Earth and the morality of his godlike power. Tragedy strikes when the Joker murders Elizabeth on her and Bruce's honeymoon. This devastating loss pulls Bruce back into the cape and cowl, reigniting his desire for vengeance. Consumed by grief and rage, Batman plans to kill the Joker publicly. Superman, still committed to his moral code, confronts Batman before he can go through with it. The result is a brutal showdown between the two heroes, with Batman donning a kryptonite-laced suit to even the odds. Ultimately, Batman makes the choice to spare the Joker, just as Lex Luthor steps out of the shadows and reveals the truth. He orchestrated everything from the beginning, even grooming Elizabeth to be Bruce's perfect match, all to push Batman into killing Superman. But with his plan unraveling, Luthor decides to take matters into his own hands. Donning a high-tech exosuit, he launches into battle against both heroes, forcing Batman and Superman to put aside their differences and fight side by side, as they ultimately defeat Luthor. Inspired by Tobey Maguire's emotionally grounded performance in Spider-Man, Wolfgang Peterson was looking for 2 actors who could bring real dramatic weight to the roles. To play Superman, he wanted Josh Hartnett, while Johnny Depp, Colin Farrell, and even Christian Bale, who would later play Batman for Christopher Nolan, were eyed for Batman. So why didn't the film happen? While Batman vs. Superman was in development, Warner Brothers was also exploring a standalone Superman movie titled Flyby, written by J.J. Abrams. The studio reportedly favored Abrams' more hopeful, optimistic take on the character over the darker, more cynical tone of Batman vs. Superman and chose to pursue Flyby instead, though that project was ultimately scrapped as well. Ironically, Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice co-writer David Goyer once dismissed the concept entirely, saying, "Batman vs. Superman is where you go when you admit to yourself that you've exhausted all possibilities. It's somewhat of an admission that the franchise is on its last gasp." Following Man of Steel, director Zack Snyder and his team started discussing ideas for the sequel. While initial ideas had Superman squaring off against Metallo, though, one idea Snyder had was that at the end of the movie, a box of kryptonite gets delivered to Bruce Wayne's house, planting the seeds for a future showdown against Superman in the third film. However, Warner Brothers, eager to fast-track a cinematic universe to rival Marvel, especially in the wake of the Avengers, pressured Snyder to bring Batman into the sequel immediately. While Man of Steel performed well financially, it didn't quite ignite mainstream enthusiasm. Adding Batman was seen as a surefire way to boost audience interest and create a marquee event. For Snyder, the contrast intrigued him. Rather than another superpowered alien, this time Superman would face off against a mortal man with no powers. Warner Brothers initially pushed Zack Snyder to cast Christian Bale as Batman, hoping to carry over the success of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. But Snyder, pressured by Nolan, pushed back, insisting that Superman would have a hard time existing in the grounded world Nolan created. As a result, Snyder argued that this new cinematic universe needed a clean break to allow characters like Batman and Superman to plausibly coexist. Additionally, Bale's version of Bruce Wayne had already retired at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, and integrating him into Snyder's rebooted universe would have required either undoing that ending or using Joseph Gordon-Levitt's Dark Knight instead. At one point, Snyder even suggested casting Bale in a completely different role just to make the separation clear, but this never came to fruition. David Goyer, who wrote Man of Steel, would return to write BVS before being replaced by Chris Terrio, who Ben Affleck brought in after being cast as Batman to improve the script. So what changes did Terrio make? In the original version of the film, Batman not only branded criminals, but was also set to end the movie by branding Lex Luthor, a move that screenwriter Chris Terrio strongly opposed. Terrio argued that while it was compelling to start the story with a darker, more vengeful Batman, his character arc only worked if he ultimately recognized the error of his ways. By the end, Bruce needed to rediscover his moral compass and evolve into the heroic figure ready to unite the Justice League. Without that transformation, Terrio questioned the entire purpose of the story. Terrio also made significant changes to the Africa sequence. Originally, this sequence included Lois Lane being punched by one of the militants, prompting her to warn them that Superman won't go easy on them after that. When Superman eventually arrives to save the day, he would unleash all his powers in retaliation. However, Terrio felt Superman was sort of like a military drone. He comes from out of nowhere from the sky and vanquishes his enemies before flying off with no consequences. As a result, Terrio wanted to ensure the film grappled with the aftermath of Superman's intervention and introduced the witness who later testifies before Congress, describing the consequences in her village from Superman's intervention. Both the Joker and the Riddler both came close to appearing in the film as Snyder and Terrio spent time exploring ways they might fit into the story. In the end, they decided it was more effective to let their presence, especially the Joker's, be felt without actually showing them. However, the film still contains subtle references to them, enriching the universe without overcrowding the narrative. Snyder felt the focus needed to remain on developing the core conflict between Batman and Superman, and bringing in other major villains would have risked diluting that central dynamic. Aquaman was originally intended to have a much larger role in the film too. Jason Momoa even trained for 8 months in preparation for his scenes, expecting a proper introduction that would set the stage for his future in the DC universe. However, after rewrites and studio revisions, his part was drastically reduced to little more than a brief underwater cameo. A significant amount of merchandise featuring Aquaman had already been developed and released, creating the impression that he would have a meaningful presence in the film. Instead, audiences were left with a fleeting glimpse of the character. To play Lex, Snyder approached Leonardo DiCaprio. While DiCaprio ultimately passed on the role, their meeting left a lasting impact on the direction of the story. According to Snyder, DiCaprio was deeply engaged with the material and offered thoughtful insights into the character of Lex, and suggested that Superman eventually fight the Justice League, a pitch Snyder found compelling enough to use in the following film. Terrio was responsible for shaping Bruce's emotional and psychological arc, fundamentally steering the story away from being a simple clash of titans. Without Terrio's influence, the film risked portraying Batman as a one-dimensional antagonist to Superman. Instead, Terrio gave Bruce depth by reimagining him as a Captain Ahab-like figure, haunted by the devastation of the Kryptonian battle from Man of Steel, and spiraling into a state of obsession. He's no longer the calculated detective, he's a man possessed, unwilling to listen to saner voices like Alfred's, who urge caution and empathy. Terrio's contributions not only led to the controversial Martha moment, which humanizes Superman to Bruce, but also helped frame the opening sequence, set in Metropolis during the climactic battle from Man of Steel, as the emotional trigger that sets Bruce down this path. The nightmare sequence was added after filming had already begun. Snyder pushed for its inclusion because work had already started on the Justice League script, and he wanted to plant a teaser for what was coming in future films. Superman also didn't originally die at the end of the film. Although the plan was always for him to leave Earth in some manner manner, like being frozen and shot into space. One major reason for that shift was to give Bruce Wayne a clear purpose moving into Justice League. With Superman still present, it would have been difficult to justify Batman stepping up as the one to gather the team. But removing Superman from the equation created space for Bruce's arc to continue, transforming him from a broken, vengeful figure into someone inspired by Superman's sacrifice. He becomes the one willing to seek out others like him, the reluctant warrior taking on a unifying role. The idea to kill Superman came from Snyder's belief that in order for him to fully embrace humanity, he has to experience the ultimate thing about being human, which is mortality. Nolan was initially against this, feeling killing off Superman in only his second film happened far too early and would feel unearned. But after Snyder laid out his vision for his Justice League, Nolan relented. Snyder and Terrio also didn't intend to call the film Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Instead, they wanted to call the film either Justice League Foundations or Justice League Rising, as they viewed it as the setup to Snyder's Justice League trilogy. They even toyed with calling it Son of Sun and Night of Night. Warner Brothers, however, balked at this and insisted it be titled Batman vs. Superman, looking to capitalize on the epic matchup between the two heroes. As a compromise, Snyder suggested Dawn of Justice as a subtitle, which the studio agreed to. However, even Snyder's suggestion to shorten the verses to the letter V was a point of conflict, and resulted in a long negotiation as Snyder wanted to keep it from being a straight versus movie, even in the most subtle way. After Warner Brothers screened the finished film, they demanded 30 minutes be cut from it. According to Terrio, as often happens in big budget filmmaking, the first things to get cut aren't the expensive VFX sequences, but the quieter scenes that actually give meaning to those bigger action sequences. Terrio would go on to say, as we learned from the two versions of Justice League, you can't skip on the character and think the audience will care about the VFX. He felt that this house of cards that had been built in order to motivate this clash between America's two favorite heroes made no sense at all after the film was cut down. It was a troubling sign of things to come, as the same studio interference and disregard for character would go on to plague Justice League even more dramatically. When it finally hit theaters, Batman v Superman was met with mixed reviews and a disappointing box office return, a far cry from the cultural milestone it was intended to be. And in a way, it echoed a warning David Goyer had given years earlier, that Batman vs. Superman is where you go when you've run out of ideas. Don't forget to click the link in the description to get the special discount CyberGhost VPN is granting to our channel users. This application will protect your data while you browse and give you full access to all block content on the internet for $2.03 a month. Totally risk-free. So check it out by following the link in the description. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of Hollywood's untold stories and unmade movies.